Hi everyone, welcome back to another What I Eat in a Day video. Before I get to the food, I always start my day with a little bit of yoga. I like to take a few minutes just to gently warm up the muscles of my body and get ready for my day. If I wake up and get straight to work, the rest of the day feels rushed and hectic. So I like to take just a moment to breathe. Even as little as 5 minutes just to sit and breathe helps to set a better tone for the day. So after I finish my gentle stretches, I'll show you my breakfast. Now that I'm all stretched out, it's time to make my breakfast. I'm starting by making my smoothie. Today I'm using kale, and I also like to add a little cucumber and celery. Today I'm also adding a couple of these little golden beets that I got in my CSA. These were so gorgeous and so tiny. I scrubbed them clean and then steamed them for a few minutes in my Instant Pot. And now I'm just using them on salads and like you see here in my smoothie. Then for a little sweetness, I'm adding frozen mango and banana, and I also add soybeans to my smoothies. Next, I'll add just a little bit of water. Sometimes I use plant-based milk, but most of the time I just use water to blend my smoothies. I also use my smoothie as an opportunity to get some spices and other things into my diet. So I add amla powder, ginger, turmeric, black pepper, and a little bit of seaweed flakes. If you've watched some of my other videos, you'll know that I eat almost the exact same thing every day. With my smoothie, I usually have some oatmeal with fruit, usually berries, but today I'm having something a little different. Okay, it's not all that different, it's still oatmeal, it's just in a different form. I recorded a video for this apple pie baked oatmeal, and I still have some left over, so I'm eating that for breakfast. This is great cold, but I prefer it warm, so I'm heating it up in the microwave. Sometimes I also like to toast it in the toaster oven so the edges get a little crispy, but today I'm going for speed. And while I'm heating that up, I decided to add some chia seeds to my smoothie today. Normally I add chia or flax to my oatmeal, but since I'm having this baked oatmeal, which does have a little bit of flax seeds, I wanted to get just a little more omega-3s, so I'm throwing that into my smoothie. So there's my beautiful breakfast. I'm going to sit down to eat before I head off to work. Once again, if you've seen any of my What I Eat in a Day videos, you know the drill. I work from home, so I'll get a couple hours of work in and then I'll have my cup of green tea. For almost the last year now, I've been drinking this green tea from Say Me Tea. It's a decaffeinated ground sencha tea. So once I've taken my little break, I'll get back to work for a couple more hours before lunch. I'm getting ready to put my lunch together now, and this right here is exactly why I started a blog. When I first went vegan, I was making all kinds of new meals, and I would just throw things together, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, but I was never paying attention to what I was making, and so I never remembered how to make it again. So I decided to start a blog so that I could save my recipes, and it kind of forced me to write things down. So this week in my CSA, I had a bunch of peppers and eggplants, and I had a few tomatoes left over from last week that needed to get used. So I decided to make this roasted red pepper and tomato soup and white bean dip that I had made last year when I got some of the similar ingredients in my CSA last year. So I sort of did a little batch prepping last night. I cut up the peppers and tomatoes and put them on a sheet pan with the eggplant, and I roasted all of that. I also wanted to add a couple garlic cloves, but I didn't want those to burn, so I was going to add those later. But when I got the garlic, I realized I also wanted to add onions. So I threw those in there with the garlic. And while I had the oven on, I also roasted some sweet potatoes. Here I have Jersey sweet potatoes and Japanese sweet potatoes. Since my Japanese sweet potatoes were so much tinier this time, I decided to cut the Jersey sweet potatoes in half. That way everything would cook at about the same rate. And then for my soup, I took the roasted peppers, onions, and garlic and tomatoes, threw that in a blender with some seasonings, and made this beautiful soup. I'll put a link to that recipe down in the description box for you, but I made a couple of adjustments. I didn't have the same type of peppers. Actually, I don't know what kind of peppers these are, I can't remember. But these are a mild pepper that has just a little bit of heat. I also got a jalapeno in my CSA this week, so I roasted that and threw it in as well for just a little bit of heat. You can also use this roasted red pepper soup as a sauce instead of eating it just as soup. And then the eggplant got blended up with white beans. My recipe called for Great Northern beans, but I just used navy beans this time and blended that all up in my food processor, and I'm gonna make a little open-faced sandwich. For my sandwich, I used this Ezekiel bread. It's made out of all whole sprouted grains and beans. For my open-faced sandwich, I'm slathering on a thick layer of the white bean and eggplant dip, and then I'm topping it with a few more onions, some cucumbers, and tomato. This tomato is so gorgeous. It's also from my CSA. For the salad, I have romaine lettuce from my CSA, and I had some leftover cabbage from last week's CSA. Then I'm adding tomatoes, cucumbers, red onions, and I made this dressing by blending walnuts with some different herbs and a little bit of red wine vinegar. I'm topping it with some pumpkin seeds. Along with my lunch, I'm having one of my favorite things. I'm taking one of those baked Jersey sweet potatoes, heating it up in the microwave, and then topping it with frozen cherries and some chopped dates. I love this so much. I think it's so delicious. After lunch, I get back to work, and I always like to try and take an afternoon break to get outside and get a little bit of sunshine. So I did that today and went out for about a 10-minute walk. And then after I was done for the day with work, it was time to make my dinner. For dinner, I'm making tostadas, and I'm going to be using these corn tortillas. Usually I like to get the thin version of this brand. They're called Thin Credibles, but this time I just got the regular ones. I do prefer the thin ones because they get really nice and crispy. These are a little tougher to chew when you do crisp them up. But I baked these in my toaster oven until they got crispy, and then I'm adding my taco lentils on top. And then I have some lettuce, tomatoes, a little bit of red onion, and then I'm topping it with a cheesy sauce. Now this sauce is kind of funny actually. I made these tostadas yesterday as well, but I didn't have any cheesy sauce made. Usually I make my sauce out of white beans or potatoes. I didn't want to do it out of white beans, and I didn't have any potatoes cooked. I also didn't have time to cook potatoes, but what I did have is some leftover mashed potatoes. So I used my mashed potatoes and mixed them with some spices and nooch and a little bit of water to blend it up, and it worked perfectly well. So I'm just using up the last little bit from what I made yesterday. Like I always say, work with what you got. It doesn't have to be difficult eating a whole food plant-based diet. Then I'm also adding some green onions and a little bit of cilantro on top. And then I have these pickled peppers. A few of those on top give it a really nice flavor. I ended up eating 3 tostadas, and then I also had some watermelon along with it. I think that's about it for this video. The only other thing I'm going to do today is a quick little workout. I used to teach aerial classes, but I've been away from that for a while. But recently I bought myself this little indoor aerial rig that lets me do a little bit of conditioning. So that's what I'm going to do tonight, but I'll go ahead and sign off here. As always, I appreciate it when you like my videos, so hit that thumbs up, and I love hearing your comments, so drop those down below. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.